Ladies and gentlemen, sports fans alike, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. One of the couple, two, three best podcasts around. So sit back, grab yourself a cold one and a Polish sausage, park your keister in the French room, and listen to Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago.
In Chicago, you know that all sports rock. The Bears, Hawks, Bulls, Cubs, and Sox. Pick your favorite, you can choose. As long as the Packers lose. For everything you need to know, it's Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. This is your host, Sean, and we are going to talk Bears season wrap-up and some of the things that go along with that, including free agency and potential needs and coaching changes. We will be talking about the Blackhawks and the Bulls finally starting to get into a groove. All of this and more on this episode of Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. And as always, we'd like to start out with mentioning our sponsor, the Rockford Ice Hogs. If you don't know the Ice Hogs, they are the AHL minor league affiliate of the Chicago Blackhawks. Located only 90 minutes from the city limit and affordable fun for the whole family, make sure you check out Rockford Ice Hogs. You get to see the Blackhawks Stars of Tomorrow today, with tickets starting at just $7. You can check them out at icehogs.com. Next home game is the 15th of January versus San Jose. Tell them Swerski Sports sent you. Well, I'm going to take this opportunity really quickly to say, if you don't know what the show is about, this is a by the fans, for the fans show about all 5 of the major Chicago sports teams. The Bulls, the Blackhawks, the Bears, the Cubs, and the Sox. Unlike a lot of the national shows where you only talk about your favorite teams for 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, unless something bad happens, or one of the local shows where they absolutely hate their fans. And don't get me wrong, some of them are okay with their fans, but most of them hate their fans. We love our fans. Whether you hate what I have to say, love what I have to say, I completely disagree with what I have to say, is you are free to disagree. This is I might have the microphone and I might be broadcasting myself, but this is a show for all of us. So if you want your comment or concern read on the air, check us out, SwerskiSports.com on the internet, Twitter at Swerski Sports, Facebook.com/Swerski Sports. Also, make sure you're hitting subscribe on however you listen to the show, Stitcher, iTunes, YouTube, and share the love with any of your friends that you love Chicago sports as well. With that, let's just jump right into the Chicago Bears. And I'm going to apologize because I've been doing this show for about 2 years, and last week was the first week I missed a show since I started doing this. And I'm going to give you a background of why, but I'm still going to apologize, is I spent the long New Year's weekend at my mother-in-law's house with my wife and daughter, and we were supposed to get back Sunday afternoon, but everything got delayed a little bit, and I live on the northwest side of the city of Chicago, and I flew into Midway, so I had to trek halfway or 3/4 of the way across the city. Got home and started to get some things done around the house, put my daughter to bed. And at that point, I'd already missed the Bears-Lions game, the last game of the season. And I fell asleep putting my daughter to bed. So I was like, all right, well, I'll watch the show and record on Monday night. And I started watching it Monday night and had some issues at home around the house that I had to take care of. So I only got to watch the first half. And then Tuesday, I watched the second half. And then Wednesday, I fell asleep putting my daughter to bed. And I woke up late. And I was like, at this point, the season's over. I'm going to just skip out and apologize to everybody. So I am sorry. I hope for the people that do listen, and there's a surprising lot of number of you. But sorry about that, and I'm going to do my best to make sure that doesn't happen again. So with the Bears, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Lions game, but mostly I'm going to talk about what's happening in the offseason now that we are in the offseason. So, jumping quickly, let's talk defense first. The defensive line was really good as far as getting pressure on Matt Stafford. Didn't quite get there. They stopped the run pretty well. The defensive line was pretty good. Linebackers, same thing I've been saying for weeks and weeks and weeks now, is that they just lack speed, and you can't be a quality NFL defense with inside linebackers that are so slow. So I mean, John Timu is a nice player. I spoke glowingly of him coming out of Washington, but my comment was then and my comment now are the same. He's too slow to be a quality NFL player. And same thing with Christian Jones. Same thing with all of the Bears middle linebackers, is that they are too slow to be starting in a quality NFL defense. And that was the same thing I said about the game on last Sunday. Defensive backs, corners, just they couldn't cover Calvin Johnson, and that's what ultimately lost them the game. The defensive scheme, I love Vic Fangio, but I felt that he trusts some of his players too much sometimes, and you get what you got there is you got too much zone coverage and not enough double coverage over the top and underneath with Calvin Johnson. And he's too big, fast, and strong to cover with any one of our cornerbacks. That's that as far as the Lions game goes. And as far as the offense goes, Adam Gase, I wasn't a huge fan of his scheme. I felt like he in the last few weeks he's gotten, especially with the offensive line struggling, he's gotten away from trying to move the pocket. When you have a struggling offense, you need to move the pocket, because what happens if you keep the pocket in the same place, those rushing defensive linemen, they just rush to a spot, and that's where they're going. If you move the pocket, you make them have to read and react to what's going on and not just instinctively go. And that causes some issues for them. And makes it more advantageous for you as a offense. And the Bears haven't been doing that lately. They've been keeping the pocket the same and keeping it Jay Cutler in the pocket more, unless he rolls out at a broken play. But this same thing happened Sunday. They kept him in the pocket way too much. The offensive line was absolutely miserable, and Jay Cutler was under pressure all day long. The tight ends were non-existent. Martellus Bennett and Zach Miller not there. Wide receivers non-existent. You're down to Josh Bellamy, Mark Mariani, Deontay Thompson, and Cameron Meredith. Those are the four wide receivers you rolled out of there, and that's not what a winning football team does. And as far as running backs, you actually got some good play, and it was if this was Matt Forte's last game as a Chicago Bear. He went out with a bang, and he looked really good out there. All three running backs looked good. But ultimately, the Lions were the better team, made the more plays, and won that game. And a lot of people want to blame it on Jay Cutler because of his 3 interceptions. But I can't in good conscience blame Jay Cutler for this, because Jay was throwing to wide receivers that just can't get open. They're not NFL number 1, number 2 wide receivers. So the defensive backs, they're not worried, and they're keeping tight pressure on. And guys aren't getting open. So Jay Cutler's forced to throw into tight coverage every time, because there's nowhere else to go, and he's already under fire. So he's trying to dodge sacks and run for his life. Of course, bad things are going to happen. I mean, it's the nature of the beast when I mean, there's nobody on earth that can throw to bad wide receivers with a bad offensive line and look good. Tom Brady, who arguably is the best quarterback in the history of the NFL, these last few weeks with a beat-up offensive line and some beat-up receivers is looking much worse than Jay Cutler. So that's a testament to Adam Gase's offense and Jay Cutler's turned over leaf. Was he fantastic? No, but he did throw for almost 250 yards and 2 touchdowns with such a bad offensive line and no wide receivers. You got to praise him a little bit on that. Everyone's got to be a little bit more realistic of what their expectations are. I guess I was torn a little bit about being a Bears fan and deciding whether or not I wanted them to win. I did want them to win because you never want to see your team lose. But on the other hand, it would have been nice to have a few extra draft pick or a few earlier spot draft pick in the first round. And that's what would happen if they would have or went by losing, is they ended up getting the number 11 overall pick in the first round. It's much nicer to have the 11 pick than the 16, 17 pick. I know if you're a good drafting team, you're going to find a good player, but it's always nicer to have your pick of guys. That's just my philosophy on it, and it turned out that the Bears did get that number 11 overall pick, and it's going to be up to Ryan Pace to be able to parlay that into another successful draft. Now, let's step back for a second. Do we consider this Bears season a success? And I'm going to go ahead and say yes. I mean, on the measuring stick, you can say, well, they finished with a better record than they did the year before. They were 1 game better. But that's a whoop to do. I'm not concerned so much about the record. What I look at is, are they in a better place than they were a year before? A year before, you didn't know who your safeties were. You didn't know who your wide receivers were. You didn't know who your head coach was. You didn't know who your whole coaching staff was. You didn't know who your general manager was. You didn't know who your quarterback was. There was a lot of questions, and the Bears did a really good job of being able to answer a lot of those questions. They did their due diligence about Jay Cutler, and they figured out that they're willing to and able to go with Jay, and it's paid dividends. Jay Cutler's arguably had the best year of his Chicago career this year, and with no wide receiver help, and a pretty banged up offensive line. So you have to look at this as a successful season, and you had a successful draft. This is the first draft I can remember where the Bears really seemed like they had a cohesive plan and knew what they were doing and really succeeded. I've been analyzing draft picks and scouting for years and years now, and I like to think that I'm pretty good at it. Am I the best in the world? No, because I would be a general manager somewhere or a head scout. But I'm pretty darn good. Not to toot my own horn. And with Jerry Angelo and Phil Emery, I never seemed to know what they were doing. I mean, sometimes if there's somebody else that professionally does this, you may disagree about what you think about a player. I mean, the easiest is, and I don't always agree with these two, but Mel Kiper and Mike Mayock. They don't always agree about a certain player, and that doesn't make one right or wrong. Before the draft, it's a little bit of a crapshoot. So if I disagreed with the Bears brass about what they thought of a player, that was fine, but I never felt like I saw a cohesive plan of what they were going to do going into the draft. It felt like it was free for all. And this year, I didn't know what to expect out of a general manager who's my age, and his first NFL draft as a GM. So, going in, I mocked a lot of players that I would draft if I was the Chicago Bears, and I had a couple from each round. And the Bears, I mocked every single player the Bears drafted except for Teo Fabaluje, who that late in the draft is just a crapshoot anyway. You sort of just pick a guy who has a trait that you like. And they picked him because he's big. You can't really teach size, so they were hoping that they could do something with him. You either drafted somebody that was speed, somebody that's just really athletic, somebody that's big, whatever the trait may be, you just draft them and hope they pan out. But the first 5 rounds, that's round 6 and 7. The first 5 rounds, you want to actually get a good football player. So let's look quickly back to recap what the Bears drafted and what we think about them now. First round, Kevin White didn't play a single snap this year, and I don't necessarily think you can call that a failure at all. I think Kevin White's going to be a really special receiver in this league. And hopefully he has no more physical ailments and is able to come back out next year and really help this organization. So can't really grade that at all, but I still feel he's going to be successful. The second round, a lot of people last year wanted Danny Shelton in the first round, and I just didn't see it. I didn't think he was worth a number 20 pick, let alone number 7 pick. And a lot of people are screaming, yelling, well, you need him to build your defense. And I stick by you draft the best player available philosophy, and he was absolutely not the best player available. And if you reach for guys rather than take the best guy, I feel like you're failing. You're failing your process, you're failing your draft board, and other teams may think you reached, but as long as you take the guy you feel is the best at that spot, that's where you show your success. And Danny Shelton was not that. I felt you could get a guy in the second round that was as good, if not better. And this was the case. The Bears took, could have been a completely different show had the Jets not done the same philosophy of picking the best player available. And they picked Leonard Williams, who was already playing in a position of strength for the Jets as the front 4 defensive line. And I, honest to goodness, thought they were going to pass, and the Bears were going to be able to get Leonard Williams, who was the ultimate guy I wanted. Kevin White was my number 2. Things might have been completely different this season had they had Leonard Williams, but we'll never know. But going into the second round, Eddie Goldman was a guy I identified as I thought you could really build around and could be a solid starter in this league. And the Bears drafted him number 2, and that was the case. Played really well this year. Third round, you have Hronis Grasu. We've talked ad nauseum about rookie centers. From my experience watching the NFL and listening to Olin Kreutz, former Pro Bowl Bear center, reiterate the same thing. It's really tough to be a rookie center in the NFL and be thrust into the starting role because you have all the responsibility of making the play calls from the offensive line. You have to snap the ball. And then you're usually small, like probably the smallest guy on the offensive line, and you have to guard a guy that's bigger and stronger than you are, and all of that at the same time. It's really a difficult task. And Hronis Grasu may not have been perfect by the end of the season, but it felt like every week he played, he made less and less mistakes, and that's a good sign. And I really think you're going to see him step up and work this offseason to get stronger, to improve his technique, and watch game film and see what he needs to do better, and he's going to be better. So that was your third pick. Your fourth round pick was Jeremy Langford, who we all saw what he did. That was a great pickup in the fourth round. And the fifth round was Adrian Amos, who started every single game as safety for the Chicago Bears. So you got to feel really positive about that draft. And going into this draft, you've got another high pick at number 11. I really think the Bears are going to parlay this into something special. And if they can get the same success they had this year, every year, you're going to have a really good team on your hands. Uh, and looking at the Bears' finances for next season or for this offseason, they've got a little over $50 million to spend, pending which of their own free agents they sign. But if you're able to do a few things like you get rid of Antrell Roll, you get rid of Jermon Bushrod, and a few other moves, you can really free up over $60 million in space. And I'm not a guy that says you have to go out and spend this all in free agency, because ultimately you want to start cultivating young players that are less expensive and build those guys up. But when you have that much money to spend, is you can really help fill in the holes that Jerry Angelo and Phil Emery have left for you on this organization, and try to fill up some of those talent gaps that you can't get right away from drafting. Drafting takes time. Drafting takes a few years, because I mean, like this year, the Bears hit on 5 picks. Well, we don't know they hit on 4 of the 6 picks. Kevin White, we don't know. Teo Fabeluge was a late round pick. So, but you hit on 4. That's 4 spots. You still have several other spots you have to fill in. So you can't just rely on the draft for the first few years. You need to supplement a little bit with free agency. And I really liked what Ryan Pace did last year. Is he found one big free agent money-wise, and that was Pernell McPhee, who is just going into his prime, and he's paying for future production, whereas some people will pay, well, that guy has been very good, and they're paying for past production, and that's when you make mistakes. You don't want to pay a guy for what he did. You want to pay a guy for what he's going to do. And then he gave a lot of other guys 1-year prove-it deals, so they have to earn that next contract, and that's what he did. You had some guys that ended up not proving it and showed that, all right, well, we gave them 1 year and that's it, we're done with them, like Alan Ball. But then there's other guys who played really well, and he played really well, like Jarvis Jenkins or Tracy Porter. Both of those guys played really well and absolutely deserved future contract. So if you're Ryan Pace, I think that's the kind of moves you have to keep doing, is get some guys that are low risk, high reward, find guys that have either proved it on your team and give them new deals like Alshon Jeffrey and Porter and Jenkins, and then sign a guy or two that's going into his prime or just came into his prime. And let's look a little bit about what they need. Let's start on offense. First of all, we have to figure out as the Bears organization is what do we do, because we know that Adam Gase is no longer with the Bears. But the thing is that can't be a surprise, because he was a hot coaching candidate prior to us bringing him here as the offensive coordinator. So you had to assume that he was either going to be a failure by not being good, or he was going to leave because he was very good and somebody was going to hire him as a head coach. And either one of those, you had to have a plan in place for a successor. And I really trust that John Fox and Ryan Pace have a plan in place and have had one all along. And the two, from what I'm hearing, is the two leading candidates are either bringing in Ken Wisenhunt or promoting Dow Logans to the quarterback's coach to be the offensive coordinator. And I think either one of those can be a good sign, is because Logans he's been there, he's coached under them, and he's you're looking at him to have some continuity there. Ken Wisenhunt has been around the block a lot of times, and he's had some success in this league. He's has head coaching experience, so he's somebody that you don't foresee going anywhere, because he's already had his shots as a head coach, and I don't know how many shots not too many guys get a third shot, so he's probably going to be there for the long haul. So I think either option could be good. So that's the first thing you have to decide. Second is I think you've got to be fully committed to Jay Cutler. You still have him under contract, so let him ride that out. So we'll go with running backs. And this is a key point, is what do you do with Matt Forte? I wrote an article for the website, if you want to check it out, at swerskisports.com. I went through several of the Bears free agents and talked about what I thought the Bears could and should do as far as some of the free agents. And this is what I have to think about Matt Forte. This is by far the toughest evaluation. If you look at sheer production and what he means to this team, both as a player and as a leader, and even as a good man, he's just a good dude. You 100% bringing him back. But the big thing with him is he's already one of the highest paid running backs in the league. If you look at it, he's the number six highest paid running back in the league, $7.6 million this year. If you actually look at running back numbers, there's only a handful of guys that get paid a lot of money, and everybody else is a have-not in this league as far as running backs goes. Out of the 146 running backs in the NFL, 146, only 9 made more than $4 million this year. 9. If you add the salary of the Bears' 2 other running backs, Kadeem Carey and Jeremy Langford, Forte made over 5.5 times those two's combined salary. So, do you want to bring him back? Of course you do. He shows he's still got a lot of gas in the tank, but it's ultimately going to come down to a numbers game, and a number that makes sense for the Bears, and a number that is comfortable for Matt Forte. You can't pay Matt Forte $8 million next year. You just can't do it. If it's me, I think a number, if you're a Bears, that you're comfortable with is $4.1 million. And where did I come up with $4.1 million? Is if you give him a 3-year deal for $12.3 million, guarantee it all, you keep him as one of the top 10 running back salaries in the NFL, and it's still affordable for what you're trying to do with the salary cap. The franchise tags and the transition tags aren't a viable option for Matt Forte, because if A, you're likely to use the franchise tag on Alshon, and B, the franchise tag and transition tags for a running back for 2016 are $11 million and $9 million respectively. So you can't do it. So Matt Forte, it's either get a deal done or he walks. I'm hoping that this organization learns from the mistakes of the Emery regime and the Urlacher situation. I hope that they go to Matt Forte and say, listen, either we don't want you back, you're not in our future plans, thank you for all your help, anything we can do to help you find another job, please let us know. Or they say, we do want you back, this is what we think we can afford right now. Is this something you're comfortable with? If he says no, you tell him, well, you know what? Go out, talk to other teams, but before you sign, let us know what those offers you're getting are. We'll see what we can do to match if it fits into our budget. That's what excuse me. I think that's what you do, and I think that says a lot about your organization and treats him with the respect that he's given this organization. I'm hoping that's what happens, but we'll see. But I really think that bringing back Matt Forte helps a new offensive coordinator. It helps this regime keep some sort of continuity, and he's still got a lot of gas in the tank, because then you have 3 really quality running backs to build upon. Offensive line, I know I've mentioned it before, and I thought that we had something good to build on going forward, but honestly, I think what we saw was fool's gold. Kyle Long they moved him at the beginning of the season, just before the first game, to right tackle, and he's had his ups and downs there. The beginning of the season struggled a lot. Then he hit his stride and was looking absolutely like a beast. And then he started to really struggle towards the end of the season. So there's a lot of things that he needs to work on as right tackle. So there's no guarantee there. Left tackle Charles Leno, he was nice player this year for what they did. He's not what you want at left tackle. You want somebody that's elite over there. I just don't think that he's that guy. If you bring him back as a backup, you got to feel comfortable with him as your backup left tackle. He's probably got to be the best left tackle backup in the league. But as a starter, I think you need to do better. Matt Lawson's great. Leave him over there. Hronis Grasu is going to be fine at center. And then right guard you've had your ups and downs at right guard as well. With Omame and Dukas, I think the Bears organization needs to improve at left tackle and right guard in order to make this a quality offensive line. And Hronis Grasu has to improve in order for this to be a better offensive line. So I don't know if it's definitely a higher priority than I thought it was going to be, but I still think it's not the highest priority, but you definitely need to improve both positions. Wide receiver, this is going to be a toss-up, is you have to figure out what you're going to do with Alshon Jeffrey. Honestly, I think Alshon Jeffrey, you have to bring him back. He's night and day different Bears offense when he's on the field. Even when he's like 70%, the Bears function so much better with Alshon Jeffrey. And unlike when Brandon Marshall was here, Brandon Marshall and Alshon Jeffrey are very similar style running backs. Kevin White is a different kind of wide receiver. Marshall and Jeffrey were pretty much the same kind of wide receiver. Kevin White, Alshon will complement each other, and you bring a different dynamic in there. And when you bring back a healthy Eddie Royal, healthy Alshon Jeffrey, a healthy Kevin White, I honestly think you bring back Marquise Wilson too, and Mark Mariani, and suddenly you've got a really special wide receiver group. You've got the budget to do it, so pull the trigger on it. A big question you have is the tight end. Is what do you do with Marty Bennett? I'm of the mind, I know he's a talented guy, and I know what he can do, but if you have that really great three-headed monster at running back, and all of your wide receivers are healthy, and you improve that offensive line, you don't need Martellus Bennett. I think this contract situation is going to be a headache. He's going to be a headache. And I think you bring back Zach Miller and you bring in another tight end. And I think you're perfectly fine in that situation without Martellus Bennett. I really do. And you save the cap room by trading him, get another pick in there, and go from there. I think you do those few things, you've got a much, much healthier offense with a really good outlook going into 2016. Now, what about defense? Defense, you need playmakers at every single level. First is you need another safety. Adrian Amos played really well this year. You have to give him props, and you have to expect that he's going to get better as he has time to the game to slow down a little bit, watch more film, have a whole off season to train as an NFL player. But I really think he's the best safety the Bears have had since Mike Brown. I think he's already on par with Chris Harris, and we'll see how he improves. But you need somebody playing opposite him. You started off with Antrell Roll. He's been hurt most of the season, and when he wasn't hurt, he wasn't playing very well. I think he's a prime candidate to get cut. He makes a lot of money, didn't perform. You have Harold Jones-Corte, who stepped in, and he had some nice games, but he had some terrible games too. You know, you got to serve him up as a backup. You can't start him. You need to bring in another safety, and that's just imperative. You saw that they're very thin at cornerback. Sherrick McManus is bad. He's got to go. Bryce Callahan was a bright spot, especially for an undrafted rookie. Porter was nice as a one-year deal, especially when you were considering starting the season with Tim Jennings and Alan Ball. Porter stepping up and showing what he can do. And Fuller's been up and down. And I think working another offseason with Vic Fangio, he's going to get his confidence back and perform. But I really think you need to add one more cornerback to your roster there to be able to compete with guys. You saw what happened with a guy like Calvin Johnson, and it just wasn't that pretty. Inside linebacker, you just need speed. You need two starting caliber inside linebackers, and that's got to be a high priority for the Bears. And then you need a playmaker on the defensive line, whether that be an edge rusher to help Pernell McPhee or a 3-4 defensive end that's better than what the Bears have been trotting out there. You need to be able to bring like a playmaker at each one of those levels. Now, I mean, you're looking at free agency, and there's a few guys in there that really fit what you want to do if you're the Chicago Bears. Sign a guy that's either in his prime or going into his prime. Like Von Miller. Von Miller would be an absolute stud with the Bears, and I would love to see it. He's arguably one of the best overall defensive players in the league. Issue is, I don't see any way that the Broncos are going to let him hit the market. Same thing with Josh Norman, the cornerback from Carolina. But so you're looking at possibly the best defensive player that's going to be hitting the free agency market will be Muhammad Wilkerson from the Jets. They've got Sheldon Richardson and Leonard Williams as draft picks. You kind of hope that Muhammad Wilkerson could be a free agent. There's Jason Pierre-Paul. You don't know what he's got. Eric Berry, the safety from the Chiefs. He came back from a cancer scare better than ever. And he's looked really good. You've got Malik Jackson from the Broncos, Bruce Irvin from the Seahawks, Eric Weddle, the safety from San Diego. I love Eric Weddle. He's a little bit on the wrong side of age 30, but that's definitely somebody you could have in there. Danny Trevathan, the linebacker from the Broncos, Norris Jenkins, Derek Johnson, the Chiefs linebacker, Prince Amukamara. There's some quality defensive players that are hitting the market. And if you're the Bears, I really feel like you need to make at least one big free agency splash and fill the rest in with some quality draft picks. And I think first up on the priority is finding speed at the middle linebacker position. So Bears' outlook is, I think we're in a much better position than we were going into this season as we are going into next season. I think we're in a much better position. Have some continuity with a head coach. I feel like if they promote the quarterback's coach, we'll still have some continuity on offense. Building on a really good draft class last year, adding Kevin White this year, plus the number 11 pick. The Bears have a lot of draft picks in this year's draft, and I feel like if you can flip a Marty Bennett for a draft pick, you do it. I think the Bears are in a good spot. But we'll talk a little bit more. If you're new to this show, the reason I even started the show in the first place was I love scouting the NFL draft, and I wanted an outlet to be able to talk about it. So what I do is every week during the off season in football is I take one position and scout all of the top players in the NFL going into the NFL draft. And I won't get every guy because I used to be able to do every guy, but I'm married, I have a kid, I have a job. It's really time consuming to watch. I don't I don't just watch highlights because that really doesn't give you. I'll take like 5 games of that player and watch every single snap of every one of those 5 games that the player has. And I note the good plays, the bad plays, the tendencies, what they do when the play's not on their side, when they're not involved in the play. I watch a lot of game film. So I try to do as many as I can, and I really try to scout and show people what these players have and what they're going to have as far as draft picks when the Bears take them. So look for that. Is 1 week I'll do running backs, 1 week I'll do cornerbacks, 1 week I'll do safeties, and finally up till we get to the NFL draft, and then I'll start doing my mocks. So that's what you got to look forward to in the next few months. Let's switch over a little bit and talk about the Blackhawks. If you're an NFL fan, you probably remember Aaron Rodgers telling the Green Bay fans, relax. And I feel like that was kind of my message with the Blackhawks is relax. This team, the nucleus is the same as it's been for 3 Stanley Cup championships now. So don't go jumping off the deep end yet because they were struggling a little bit. This team has the heart of a champion, and they were going to get it all together. It just was going to take a little bit of time. They had a lot of turnover, a lot of new players, a lot of new positions to fill, and it took time to start figuring this stuff out, and they still haven't even gotten it all together. The first and foremost is they had to figure out that defense. You lost Johnny Oduya, who was like a linchpin. He was the guy that provided you with 2 impeccable pairings, because you had Keith Seabrook was one of the best defensive pairings in hockey, and then Jalmerson Oduya was another solid one, and that left you to have Roosevelt and Trevor Van Riemsdyk as your third one, and with a veteran and a young kid, and allow them to build some chemistry, and it really was good. And by Oduya leaving free agency because the Blackhawks couldn't afford him, they've really struggled to figure out what they've been doing, and especially when you added Keith's injury in there, they're just starting to figure it out. You saw when the Blackhawks traded Patrick Sharp is they brought over Trevor Daley, and they tried him out to be on that second pairing, and he just never clicked with the Blackhawks. For being a guy supposedly so fast as a defenseman, felt like he was chasing a lot, and he never really fit in what the Blackhawks were doing, and he didn't help on the offense. It was just not a good situation, and the Blackhawks are not afraid to make moves. They turned around and just flipped him again for Rob Scuderi, who's just been a healthy scratch. And finally, they're starting to figure it out who they have, with the top pairing being Jalmerson and Keith, then Eric Gustafson, Brent Seabrook, and then back to the Trevor Van Riemsdyk, Michael Roosevelt. And it's looked very good for these last few games. For a while, on offense they were a one-line team. It was that Anisimov, Kane, Panarin line, and that was a lights-out line. But even the Taves line hadn't looked good for a while. Finally, you're starting to get some traction in figuring out who you have, and you've got 3 lines that are firing on all cylinders, and that 4th line has struggled, but they feel like they're about to get that in the groove too. So you got your top line with Taves, Shaw, and Hossa finally finding its magic. The Nisimov, Panarin, Kane line is just unbelievable. And for years, everybody's been saying that you just need that second line center to go with Kane. They finally found that guy in Artem Anisimov. This line is going to be so fun to watch for years. And then you've got Desjardins, who's finally starting to play like the guy we saw last year, and Tavo is playing very well on that third line. So you have, and then a guy that I felt like should have been up last year for the Blackhawks. He's finally brought him up partway through this season, is from the Rockford Ice Hogs. One of our sponsors, icehogs.com, is Philip Deneau, who I absolutely love. And that third line, you've got Philip Deneau, Andrew Desjardins, Teuvo Teravainen, and it's finally the beauty of what the Blackhawks have been able to do the last few years is they've been able to roll 4 lines deep. And they haven't been able to do that this year. It's been sparing minutes for the third and fourth lines, but that third line is starting to finally click, and the fourth line, Brian Bickled that line, because that's a new verb, is you bickle it, and screwed up. But they've replaced him with Brandon Mashinter, and now you've got Rasmussen, Mashinter, and Ryan Garbett, and that fourth line is starting to look better. Quenville was quoted as saying that line, just change it up a little bit. That's the one line that hasn't played much. Been moving some pieces around on that line as we've gone along here. We've been pretty consistent through our lineup. That's the one thing we're looking for, a little bit more balance. With Mashinter finally getting in there and getting a good, healthy look, it's Brian Bickle's going to be a healthy scratch again, and it's basically another tough day in a season that's just been filled with the tough days for that guy. He was quoted as saying, mentally it's frustrated, but we're on a 6-game winning streak, so what can you say? We're winning. That's the most important thing. And if you're Brian Bickle, it's really hard, because you get sent down to Rockford and you do really well in Rockford, and you come back up and you just can't find your groove in the NHL. And that's got to be a tough spot, because you're an older guy now, and you're a tweener. You're not good enough to be in the NHL, but you're too good to be in Rockford. So we'll see what goes from there. But you add in the quality play of Corey Crawford, and this team is on a 6-game winning streak, and they've quickly rising to the top of the NHL's Western Conference. They're back to the number 2 seed, and tonight they're playing, as I'm recording this, they're playing the Avalanche, and last I looked, they were up 6-2, so they were just really creaming them. And it's once this win comes through, they'll only be 4 points behind Dallas for the top spot in the Western Conference. So that's where I really see the Blackhawks is. They're going to have to be on the 7-game winning streak. Things are really starting to click, and this team, once they find their groove and they're on all cylinders, they're a really tough team to beat. I really can't wait for the playoffs for Dallas and Chicago to play, because I think Dallas is a really tough matchup for the Blackhawks, and it's going to be a really fun series to watch. That's really all I have to say about that. And finally, I'm going to wrap it up a little. Well, one quick thing I want to make is one note is Addison Russell from the Blackhawks. Addison Russell, the infielder for the Chicago Cubs, he got married yesterday. So I want to wish him a congratulations to him and his lovely wife, and best of luck to them. Hopefully that helps him feel much more confident and prepared and more adult-like going into the season. But the last thing I want to talk about is the Chicago Bulls, and this is going to be quick. This Bulls team has had a lot of struggles with, finding out who their identity was. Is going from a team of a very defensive-minded coach to that defensive coach was very in-your-face, aggressive coach, and now to a much more laid-back offensive-style coach. It's really a tough transition, and you have some really awful games this year, and you've got Jimmy Butler, who's your best player, and he comes out and basically tells your coach he's got to coach harder. That's something that you really don't say or do in the NBA or any of the leagues. You don't come out and say that to the media about your coach. He said some negative things about some of his players, and there was a lot of things that were supposed to remain in-house that sort of came out of the house. That's a tough one. But since then, this team has really started to figure it out. Jimmy Butler is far and away the best player on this team, and he's the one that's going to take them to the next level or not. We thought it was going to be Derrick Rose several years back, but Derrick Rose, too many injuries, too many tolls on his body, not enough heart. He's not that guy. And in this winning streak that the Bulls went on that finally got snapped is Derrick Rose played well enough, and he learned his role that he's not Batman. He's Robin. He's the number 2 to Jimmy Butler. You have Tony Snell, who's playing much better. Still not great, but much better. You have Bobby Portis actually getting quality minutes and showing what he can do. And is he an NBA star? No. But he's definitely a guy that opposing coaches are finally starting to prep for. And you've got to be able to take him and plan for him, because he's a presence and he's a rebounding guy, and he gets into the head of the other team. You've got to prep for him. And Paul Gasol is Paul Gasol, and he's playing really well. So you have this team that's finally figuring out what it is that they do. And unfortunately, it's all while Joakim Noah is out with injury. And Joe has been a great guy for the city, great ambassador for the team. He's played great in the times that, Derrick Rose is out for a whole season. He's played magnificently for the Bulls, and he's done some great things. But I think it's time that Joakim Noah moves on, because he's not the future anymore. He makes a lot of money, and Bobby Portis needs those minutes. And if you're the Bulls, if you can swing a trade and move Joakim Noah with his expiring contract for a wing player, you've got to consider that as a coup and really a quality move. That's really what you need, because you don't know what you're going to get back from Dunleavy. He was supposed to be back a long time ago, and he just hasn't been back, and you don't know what you're going to get out of Dunleavy at all this season or ever, because he's an older guy with a back issue, and you really were counting on him. And I know my friends at the podcast, and if it's BAWL, make sure you check them out. But they hate on Dunleavy. But really, I think Dunleavy has been everything the Bulls could have asked him more. He plays a good enough defense. He's a good enough scorer. He's basically gives you whatever you need. He'll go in there and try to rebound. He'll try to guard on the outside. He'll try to guard on the inside. He'll try to score. Whatever it is you need, that's what he does, and he's kind of the glue that holds this team together, and without him, they really struggled. And Tony Snell and Doug McDermott just don't fill the same void that Mike Dunleavy does. So if you're the Bulls, you've got to be able to swing a trade, get Bobby Portis those minutes, bring you a much-needed wing player in here to help this team out, and if you look at it, the Bulls are the number 2 seed in the Eastern Conference behind Cleveland Cavaliers. And the beauty of the number 2 seed, if you're able to hold on to that, I know they've got a long way to go in the season. It's 82 games in the season, and they've played 35. So they're not even halfway through the season. But if they're able to hold on to this number 2 seed, the beauty of that is you don't play Cleveland until the Eastern Conference Finals, if you're able to make it that far. And there's a couple